Love podcasts, hate disabled people. It's the PoliticsJOE podcast. Wow. Do you know what I can never get right? I always start clapping as I say that.
Yeah, so you don't really get the whole gusto behind whatever you're saying.
Yeah.
That was a play on the budget, though. It had nothing to do with our position on disabled people. Or your position on disabled people.
Well, we are here to talk about the budget.
Yeah.
Well, it's called a budget. It was meant to just be a spring statement. But the big problem was that Rachel Reeves wiped out her headroom.
Mm-hmm. Headroom's back. No, she brought
Headroom's
back headroom.
Back. No. See, this is like it's like a second budget because she knocked out her headroom.
I see. Very good.
So she had to find more room in head.
For head. Yeah.
For head, exactly.
There's always more room for head.
Mm-hmm.
This is fun, isn't it?
It's just Ava and Seán, if you were wondering.
Yeah.
If you're not watching. Steak and blowjob day.
Last week or the week before.
Which is interesting because that would have been about the time when she sent off the proposals to the OBR.
So it was a budget for head
No, it was.
on steak and blowjob day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They would have sent it back around steak and blowjob day saying not enough room for head.
So she went straight back to number 11 to get more time for head. Mm-hmm. More room for head, I beg your pardon.
She went straight back to number 11 and she said, I don't think we've taken enough away from Britain's poorest people. Mm-hmm. We've got to go further.
Mm-hmm. We need to give everyone else some more head.
More head.
At the expense of the disabled.
Rachel Reeves says the world is changing before our very eyes.
It has been changing for a while, though. You know, like it's not something that has just happened since the budget.
Well, Seán, the Ukraine war has only been...
Well, famously only 6 months old, that war.
Well, yeah. So, but, you know, what's important to remember is that during their time in opposition, Labour went to great pains to sort of laugh and mock this global headwinds line that Chancellor Jeremy Hunt used to purport every week at the dispatch box. And they would slam that. They would say, well, what on earth do you've got, what's that got to do with the price of fish? And now that they're in government, that's the cost of the mackerel.
But it's always the way, isn't it? Like you spend your time, I mean, we've done clips of it from, was it the disability cuts or was it something else where Keir Starmer 2 or 3 years ago was international aid, cutting international aid.
Yes.
I mean, you could go back into Hansard and find anything that they've done in the last 6 months and Keir Starmer or Rachel Reeves would have said the opposite a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But it's always for this particular Labour government that they had a position on something that seemed to be the popular and objectively correct position to have, which is in a time where inflation is out of control, where interest rates are high, it is not a good idea to take money in real terms from the most vulnerable people in society. That's something they would have said a year ago. It doesn't seem like they're saying that anymore, you know. But I did find, jumping all over the place here, but in Mel Stride's response to the spring statement, it was quite funny to see him so blatantly avoid open goals on things. So when it came to, he was referencing how Rachel Reeves in the statement was talking about how interest rates have fallen 3 times since Labour have come into government. And rather than coming back with the line of, well, these are things that are not within the control of your government, you can't take credit for this, his response was being fully mindful of the fact that his government or the Conservative government have used lines like that previously. Rather than saying you have no control over that, saying there should have been more cuts to interest rates in the last 9 months. It's like, I guess we'll talk about it when we get to PMQs later on, but this kind of like idea of controlled opposition, that there's not actually legitimate
challenge,
pushback or challenge on anything that the government are doing at the moment.
Because they're doing something quite similar to what the Conservatives did, right?
It's near identical.
Which is not do very much launch a number or a swathe of policy announcements that don't seem to be fulfilled. Very few have been actually, completed at this point in time. And then boast that inflation has come down.
Yeah.
When it's got nothing to do with you. I mean, it does in some respects. But I do remember Rachel Reeves stressing that bringing inflation down was not Rishi Sunak.
It's the Bank of England.
Gift. Yeah. No. Sorry, we're talking about two different things. But yeah. Right. So let's talk about how Labour's plan for change is working. I feel better.
Yeah, me too. It's so reassuring.
It's interesting because this spring statement is it's predicated on growth, right? Which has been their entire mission since they got into government, and even before, actually during the election period. It was, we are going to stimulate growth, and that is how we will get the economy back on track. Now that they've been in for 6 months, they've noticed that actually it's not that easy to sort of fluff the economy quite as quick as they would like to. And so they've had to make drastic cuts. And I wouldn't even argue these cuts were particularly dramatic, widespread. They seem to be honed in on the sort of low-hanging fruit that's quite easy to get through the tabloids and various other broadsheets as positive measures, things that the public want to see.
Yeah.
But in terms of actually doing anything that would ignite radical change, I don't see anything. I'm really quite struck by the tax avoidance section of her spring statement, where it's like the premise of what she's saying is entirely correct, that basically this country is being taken for a ride by tax avoiders. So she's going to crack down on tax evasion, raising a further £1 billion. And then later in the Parliament, we're going to see 6.5 billion, he said million, billion pounds on another crackdown. So that's by the end of the forecast period. Now, that together, we're looking at around £7 billion here. Now, look, I just did a cursory little search on corporation tax. Just had a little browse. And to me, it feels like you could make up those numbers by ensuring that US companies and other foreign companies actually pay their fair share of tax. So, for example, my notes are not to hand.
You're just shuffling them around on the table.
I'm just shuffling around.
Even with
the...
you've got it, have you?
Okay, so let's talk about the tax year 22-23, because obviously we've just filed and we're a bit behind the times on tax years here. A total of £11.5 billion was missing from foreign companies' tax payments. US multinationals underpaid £5.6 billion in tax in the UK in 2021-2022. 7 big US companies alone paid £2 billion less tax in 2021 than might have been had their profits not been routed elsewhere, paying just £750 million rather than an estimated £2.8 billion. Now, look, I'm not trying to be overly simplistic here. I'm not sort of trying to do that kind of base left-wing argument, which is like, why don't you just tax the big conglomerates and corporations? But, I mean, to me, this is so obvious.
I mean, to me, it just sounds like you hate enterprise.
Right. Right.
Well, no, you're completely right. I mean, the number that she said in the spring statement when it came to cutting PIP payments was 4.8 or 4. But I think it was 4.8. Yes, 4.8 billion pounds. It's going to boost the economy by, or is going to give back to the exchequer. Save. When you've got this, and it does, as you're saying, like you bang this drum so often that it almost sounds like a redundant argument to say things like tax the rich, tax the multinational corporations, the big US social media companies. People would stop saying that if you did that in the first place. And when you see the numbers down in front of you, and when you see what things like we were talking there a second ago about tax fraud, that's going to save what, 1 billion? You compare that with 4.8 billion in the cut to PIP. You could surely do more when it comes to tax fraud or progressive taxation systems. You've got the entire treasury at your whim to come up with some sort of progressive tax structure, rather than just coming after people who already don't have anything in the first place.
Absolutely. And the higher rate of tax has come down dramatically. If you look back to the sort of 50s, 60s, it has come down dramatically. Has that encouraged more people to stay here and invest here? I mean, on the surface, yes, many businesses do invest in the United Kingdom. If you look at some of the incentives that have brought those large companies to the UK, they have been tax breaks. So even when you're looking at the already very low rate of corporation tax, actually some companies are dodging that altogether. Companies like Amazon in 2021 did not pay it at all. Rishi Sunak, during his sort of last few months in administration, he was trying to attract these sort of unicorn businesses and even like big US data firms and tech firms. And he was enticing them with very little tax and massive proximity to Europe. And when you think about the amount of missing tax by inviting those companies to come to the United Kingdom, knowing that that is then paid for off the back of disabled people, as it's going to be following this spring statement, that is egregious.
Yeah. It's also, when it comes to these things, as I often do on this podcast, I bring Ireland in when we talk about anything. But particularly when it comes to US multinationals, in the end of last year, you had the European Union court case with Ireland defending Apple's right to not pay Ireland 13 billion euros worth of tax. And for the longest time, Ireland was, I mean, even when I was studying geography in primary school, it was kind of seen as a pull factor of Ireland to have a low corporation tax rate. But it was never said in school that actually these corporations don't pay that tax rate in the first place. But the way the government always kind of defends the position of these multinationals that are not paying their fair due would be, well, had they not been in the country in the first place, which I guess is what a development, if there was ever going to be pushback on Labour for not implementing these tax structures, would be, if we tax these people and they leave, we then have a problem with unemployment in that sector, where people who were on high wages are no longer paying into the exchequer, and then we have an even bigger problem. I think that argument only goes so far, right? Like you can entice somebody into the country with a low corporation tax rate or being very laissez-faire with how you tax them in the first place. But once you set up shop here, and once you have all of the pull factors of being a country with, I mean, I guess Ireland maybe more so than the UK because it's in the European Union, but the UK certainly to some extent. Once these companies set up shop here, it's a very big business decision to just turn around and say, we're going to sack 5,000 people on the spot because we're actually paying a level of tax. You know, they'll find another way to not pay tax, but they'll pay more than they were before, you know. And it goes on as well to the kind of the idea of taxing the rich or not taxing the rich, and the defense always being, well, they'll just leave. They won't, you know, maybe some of them will, but
Sadiq Khan always makes a good argument about that, doesn't he? He's always like, wealthy people are in London because they like the schools, they like the restaurants, they like being in the city. They're not going to leave if you charge them extra tax.
Exactly.
We're not talking about, people always sort of envision tax or the tax system through their own bank accounts. We're not talking about a normal person's bank account where money comes in, money goes out, and you have to be a little bit careful about what you spend where. We're talking about people who have, like, you know, people who service their bank accounts for them. They don't even know what's in their bank accounts. They have assets.
Capital gains.
We're not, it's not the same level, all right? You've got to take your own empathy out of this situation if we're going to have a proper conversation about it. I want to go back to what you were talking about there, about businesses bringing in a lot of tax by employing people in local areas or in, you know, sort of bringing the local area up. And I want to talk about Coventry and the Amazon warehouse there. That was seen on paper as a brilliant thing to happen to Coventry. It's this huge warehouse. It employs a lot of people. But when you bring in a company like Amazon, okay, they may provide jobs to a local area, but they also take away from the local area. If people can buy something from Amazon on the cheap, and we know that Amazon will always be the cheapest option because that's what they fight for. Sometimes they'll even happily make a loss on a product as long as they're the cheapest option or provider. That means that local high streets close. That means that money is going out of, well, the local area, whatever rent that shop would have provided to a landlord. You know, we can talk about that another day. The employees of that shop, the council, what they would have got from parking on the local high street, road infrastructure, because if the road isn't being used, the council's not going to fix it. There's this huge knock-on effect to local areas.
Yeah. It's also the circular economy has gone out of it then, right? Like it's even outside of the services that exist, if you've got this massive multinational corporation that is already taking the piss when it comes to tax, and then before you even talk about business practices or anything like that, the idea that the people who work in circular economies in the UK then use Amazon as a service, and Amazon don't feed back into that economy, you're then, even before it becomes a question of, well, nobody uses the road, well, nobody is using this service here because they're getting it on Amazon, there isn't any money back into the economy to make those changes anyway, because Amazon has already taken that money out of the economy. Like, it's the whole... The high street is the most basic example of how economics works. You know, you have your shop, you sell to Bill sells to Paul sells back to you, and it works in a circle. But you've got this higher entity that doesn't pay into that circle at all. It just takes and takes and takes.
And then you've got the government having to provide a levelling up fund because the high street is so dilapidated that they need extra funds. So the government is being hemorrhaged twice.
Yeah.
It's first not receiving the correct corporation tax, and then it's having to bail out the high street that Amazon defunded.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember now the thing that Rachel Reeves said when it came to... I beg your pardon.
Give me a hint.
So at the beginning of the statement, she made the point that actually this government, if you take away the cuts to PIP, the cuts to health benefits on universal credit, things like this, and putting money into the defence sector, she said that Labour are on track to hit targets set by the OBR by the end of the government. Outside of what she said today, or actually including what you said today and what you said in the budget, you kind of look at that kind of rhetoric and say, okay, fair enough. You might be able to turn around in 5 years' time and say, well, we've actually got a budget surplus this year. But the question is, at what cost have you got a budget surplus? You know, like, people often have a pop at us for saying that this government is kind of soft launching austerity 2.0 and kind of just like slowly but surely giving the slow death of British services, British people. But if you've kind of just continued along the road of the Conservative government, and in some cases accelerated things that the Conservatives were doing in their last year or last 2 years, all with the goal of saying in 5 years' time we're going to be in the green, but we have not done anything to make anyone's lives better in that time.
When they've had to spend that money in other places, this is the thing that I often think gets missed. If you take away PIP payments, people might have a mental health crisis. You've now got to pay for them when they fall through the cracks. Someone might end up homeless because their housing benefit doesn't cover their home anymore. Okay, the state has to pick that up. You have to pay for it in other areas. Children might turn up. You might have a 6-year-old who's lost all their teeth because their teeth haven't been brushed properly. These are all symptoms of when you cut the welfare state. What happens to that child? You've got to pay for a new set of teeth.
But this is the thing. It's like eradicating, like, I feel like I'm going to the end of the road with this in many ways, but it seems like there's an effort to kind of strip the state of any care to the citizens, right? Like, you've got the way Wes Streeting is talking about the NHS and NHS reform, right? And so to the point about dentistry for children, or to the point about someone's mental health episode, eventually you will reach a point where actually it isn't the state's responsibility, or it isn't the state's duty to the people of the state to provide and care for the people that live there. And it feels like as you slowly go down this road of we're making a cost saving here, we're making a cost saving there, without looking at the consequences of those savings, and without looking at the real material needs of people using those services in the first place, you're just going to get to a point where you're kind of hyper-capitalism, hyper-individualism, this world where, okay, yes, we've got planning reform, which was the one thing that I looked at in the spring statement and said, actually, this is quite a decent stat. We've got planning reform. We've got like this new project of house building and kind of redevelopment of grey belt land, but everything else has gone to shit. You know, if you're,
and where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line on when the state should stop intervening?
Well, this is
because
the point.
You could make an argument if the state's not responsible for, say, like children brushing their teeth. Let's take like a really, I don't know, one of the more contentious, stupidly contentious arguments. If the state is not responsible for a child's health, is the state responsible if your house gets flooded? Should it have to keep paying for the flood barriers? Is it responsible for planning reforms? Should it keep building houses or ploughing money into that? Should it have GB? Should it provide GB energy? Should it provide new solar panels? Should it give a fuck if the power supply to Heathrow goes out for a day? Like, where do you draw the line of where the state is responsible?
Yeah, it's just politics then just becomes a drama rather than the functioning of a country. Like, keeping the lights on. Keeping
it functional.
Yeah.
Oh, it drove me mad, all of the contention against the teeth brushing thing, because it was the most, to me, it was the most obvious policy.
Yeah.
If children are coming into school and they've got rotten teeth and we have an NHS dentistry system that does not provide for children, for all children universally in the way that it should, it makes sense for a teacher to take out a half an hour lesson where they teach a child how to brush their teeth. And perhaps at 11 o'clock, the children will go and brush their teeth for 2 minutes. Why on earth that caused some sort of culture war controversy is totally beyond me. And it makes me feel like a lot of people in the commentariat just enjoy willfully disagreeing or willfully misunderstanding.
Yeah.
It's totally nonsensical. A child has rotten teeth. A child is being, a record number of children are being referred to the NHS because they have rotten teeth. What's the answer? Do nothing.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Like, preventative measures are seen as a nanny state or seen as an authoritarianism or... Yeah.
And look at your generation's teeth. A lot of you lot who are complaining, oh, wow, isn't it the parents' responsibility to teach a child to brush their teeth? Well, your mother did not teach you to brush your teeth.
Yours are brown.
He'd be lucky. Honestly, oh my God, I just started speaking like my mum, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, their teeth are grey. Your teeth are disgusting. It's just totally nonsensical to me, because also I could honestly go on about dentistry, I think, for the next hour, but we should move on.
Well, do you know what? Let's, like, while we're talking about this, we are talking about political choices, right? And that's kind of what you wanted to get at when it came to post-war Britain and the actions of the Attlee government, right?
Yeah,
and
I just wanted to touch on that. Yeah,
it's exactly what we're talking about here, right? That you have political choices. The spring statement is a political choice to cut benefits for people for the sake of raising defence spending and making Britain a defence technology superpower. That's the long and short of what that statement was. It was. And I really want to stress this. Defence spending, all right, if you create these bomb factories in Belfast, leave the morality aside for one moment. Like that is some of the best equipped people in the United Kingdom to build bombs. I can say it. I'm allowed to say it. You can't laugh or cry about it.
What worries me about US tech companies being invited here, or data centers, is that those companies are serviced via the US. It means that the ramifications of inviting those sort of companies to come and set up shop here, it's not going to tally with the results in growth that Rachel Reeves is projecting. She's arguing that, say, if a big company opens a data center here, we're going to have all of these jobs and they're going to pay tax. No. They're going to funnel the tax out of the United Kingdom. We are not going to see a lot of that in the Exchequer. And the more worrying thing that happens when you invite these big US tech companies to come and set up shop in the UK is they want a more lax approach to regulation. And that means that they have de facto soft power in the United Kingdom. So when we're talking about things like a growing number of children harming themselves because of content they've seen online. And we want to bring in something like the online safety bill to combat that, instead of taking the sensible moral approach that a government should take and say, that's a dangerous social media company, we're going to ban that here, or we're going to crack down on it, or make it the regulation
force them to
tighter.
regulate themselves.
Instead, we're going to do nothing because it might discourage other tech companies from investing in the United Kingdom. The more social media companies invest in the United Kingdom, the more lax the regulation they are going to persuade the government to give into. That you're essentially being governed by the tech sector.
Yeah.
If you continue to allow this influx of tech companies. When did this turn into like this sort of debate? We were meant to be talking about the
very beginning
statement.
it started like that, didn't it?
Sorry.
But no, like, it's, to your point, it is, we don't know yet because the money hasn't been pumped in to the extent that that it needs to be, or that Labour wanted to be. But judging by how things like, say, for example, GB Energy, that was initially to be a kind of like green energy revolution in the United Kingdom, by the people, for the people, beneficial from top to bottom, whether it's state ownership of the infrastructure, whether it's state ownership of or bringing down energy bills or whatever it might be. It's now transpired that it's an umbrella company to give funding to other energy firms to continue to siphon profits out of the United Kingdom. And you look at the way that they're talking about defence spending now, and in terms of like the political points of it, sure, does the UK need to spend more on defence? That's a conversation for another day. They are spending more on defence. They're making decisions as to why they're going to do that, how they're going to do that. But point being, it is not British government defence manufacturers that are making the arms that they're going to be selling or going to be innovating in. So it is anemic growth to what we were talking earlier on, where you have...
They do want to make it British manufacturers, though, do they not? That's the point.
Well, British private manufacturers.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah.
So it's
nationalise the bombs.
Yeah, well, nationalise the responsibility for making the bombs, you know?
Well.
Like, we're going to give these private companies, I don't know what they're going to give them to expand their capacity to encourage more people into those jobs. Yes, certainly the people that are going to start working in the defence sector are going to be paying tax, but those companies are going to find a way to not pay their share of that. Excuse me. They're going to find a way to not have to pay the difference or the proportional increase in their output, right? There's going to be some sort of sweetheart deal for them. I'm surmising, but it's not an exponential growth. It's not a growth that can be seen as a game changer for the United Kingdom. It's extra jobs in a very specific sector. Are people who are unemployed in the United Kingdom all qualified in defence manufacturing? Are there a lot of people in the UK that are unemployed and are qualified in defence manufacturing?
You could get them up from Tata Steel, couldn't you?
Well, yeah, there's an argument for reskilling and upskilling people.
Grangemouth as well.
Absolutely. But these are not conversations
You're all moving
to
Belfast. Yeah. We don't believe in localising the economy.
But it's...
Bus them in.
There is definitely an argument to be made for reskilling and upskilling people that have been kind of made redundant, put out of work because of their industry being seen as obsolete by the government. But that doesn't tackle the issue of the people that were unemployed before that. You know, are these people, like, where is your program to reskill those people? Is it going to be a 6-week course from the job centre that's going to get somebody qualified to make bombs?
Well, that's what they think is going to happen, isn't it? I mean,
it'll all fix itself.
They'll all rather than them just languishing there. You know, one phrase that we've stopped using is underemployment, which was rife. We used to use that phrase a lot, sort of 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
No, maybe a bit earlier than that. Sorry, I love lying.
It's
maybe
like
about
mid-2010s, yeah.
Yeah. We don't talk about that phrase anymore, but it's very interesting. It's really pertinent at this point in time when you look at Port Talbot closing, you look at Grangemouth closing. Cheerios, I think they've just moved as well. There are a number of other factories that are closing.
As in the cereal company?
Yeah, Cheerios. That was a relocation.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Or they're on strike because it's a proposed relocation.
Got you.
But when you look at the level of underemployment, you might get a record number of people into work, but are those people in jobs that they were being paid the same amount the last time they had employment? You know, that's important, because that means if you're, God, I'm about to say something so stupid. If you're earning less, more people might be employed, but if they're all earning less, there is less going into the exchequer. That's all I have to say about that.
But yeah, no,
you waiting for my bombshell moment and me go, that's actually
that's the bombshell right there.
That is actually it.
But no, like it's the same with things like talking about how inflation has come down, when inflation itself means that everything is getting more expensive. People are not seeing real terms pay increases on a day-to-day basis or a quarter-to-quarter, year-to-year basis. So things are still getting proportionally more expensive for everybody. And to say that, to go off the line of growth for growth's sake, to go off the line that it doesn't matter whether, because we're bringing inflation down, that's good. It doesn't have to coincide with wages being re-upped to have some sort of proportional impact on somebody's pocket, right? You combine all of these things together and you will inevitably reduce the purchasing power of the economy. People are not going to go out from one day to the next and say, well, Rachel Reeves said that the government are going after growth, and according to the OBR, everything is fine. So I should just go out and buy a new car, or I should buy an extension for my house, or I should do all of these things because they said I should.
Yeah.
If you don't feel it, you're not going to do it. And so it's
I think that you can feel that around London at the moment. I don't know what it's like elsewhere.
My sisters were here over the weekend and I couldn't believe how quiet it was around where I live.
It's crazy, isn't it? But it's everywhere. It's everywhere. I mean, you know where I live, and I'm telling you, I don't see a soul in the pubs around there at the moment. Yeah. I find it quite frightening.
And even as far back, like, I mean, it's not to say that things were better under the Conservatives. Absolutely not. But you hark back 2, 3, 4 years ago, you go into a pub on the weekend and you'd be standing for the entire night because there'd be nowhere to sit.
But I think that was because there was a promise that things were going to get better. And so people were perhaps putting more on credit. Whereas now there's sort of the realization that actually we're not even on the hill. We're not on the uphill battle.
Yeah.
This spring statement is telling us that we've got more hard times to come.
Yeah.
That you need to start saving.
But that's the message that people are taking, you know? Like, that's ultimately what anybody is going to hear from any of this. Doesn't matter if you're saying we're going to increase defense spending, we're increasing capital spending, which also includes defense spending, by the way. And here's a stat about how the economy is going to grow in 10 years' time because of our planning reforms. You're just going to take the cuts out of that and say, well, they've been in for 9 months now and all I've heard is this is no longer a thing that's going to happen. That's no longer a thing that's going to happen. We're going to have to tighten our belts, but the rich people can continue to get rich.
They're compounded cuts, though. That's the thing. They're compounded on the top of austerity and then several other budgets that have had to make significant cuts over the last few years.
But precisely, it's like...
That's what's frightening.
Yeah, but to go back to like the pounding the pavement part of it, is that whatever hope people had in July last year has slowly been chiseled away at since then. And you've now reached a point where people are coming to the conclusion that actually things, if they are to get better, it's not now, and it's not next year, and it's not the year after that. So what am I going to do? And you see it when you walk around any town in the UK. Like, it doesn't even have to be... Doesn't have to be London, doesn't have to be Glasgow, Edinburgh, Belfast, wherever it might be.
I know they hate when we talk about London, but I'm just telling you what we're seeing every day here. That's all, right?
But like even when we go out and about into, like you were in Runcorn over the last couple of days, like we go out into the wider parts of the United Kingdom.
Runcorn scared me. Runcorn scared me.
But it's like that everywhere.
The shopping centre was empty. I'm not joking. It was a shopping mall, right? And a proper mall. There was an Iceland in there. There were charity shops in there. Most of the storefronts were closed. there was a little calf, like a a calf kind of thing. Like, I was looking at it going, oh my God. And a Peacock's is never a good sign in a shopping centre if that's your main high street brand in there. And a Greggs. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Copy and paste high street.
Everywhere. And it was a huge shopping centre.
Yeah.
Spoke to a woman there, actually. She was really interesting, but she wouldn't go on camera. But she worked for the local council. And she said that this is why people are going to vote for reform, essentially, this shopping centre. She was like, it was never, ever like this. 15 years ago, it was not like this. Now that no one's got any money to spend, zero.
Yeah.
When have you ever heard of a shopping centre that normally has got high street clothing shops in it or whatever? The main shop in there is in Iceland. It's nuts to me.
But you see, it's the issue as well. When we're talking about reform, people are not looking to reform because they really agree with their fiscal policy, or they might agree with one or two things, but there's no real cohesive, apart from maybe immigration. People,
even then, I think that can be a bit inconsistent. That line,
sure, but like all of it is kind of, there isn't
subjective. A lot of it, isn't it? Yeah.
There isn't really a demographic of people that you can look at and say, these people that are pissed off about this are going to reform. Yeah,
like you could do with the Green Party.
Yeah.
Or the Lib Dems.
Exactly.
A Brexiteer who cares about Ukraine, a Remainer who cares about Ukraine, goes to the Liberal Democrats, right?
Yeah. With reform, it is that
an eco-conscious wealth tax fan goes for the Green Party.
Your Prince Charleses of the world. King Charleses, beg your pardon.
I think that we talked a lot. I tell you something, I got a hell of a lot of press releases today.
Yeah.
I'm sure you did too.
Yeah.
Hell of a lot of quotes from different charities, from different organisations. I did not read a single positive press release. Normally you'll get a bit of spin. I saw Tom Baldwin, who wrote the biography of Keir Starmer, the completely objective biography.
Oh, of course,
yeah. He really tried his best on Sky News this morning. I thought I was going to throw my coffee at the TV. Really, really wound me up.
What did he say?
Oh, there was a lot of things, but the one thing that really shook me to my core was the Sabrina Carpenter, Rachel Reeves taking the Sabrina Carpenter's tickets. And he was like, the media love to blow these sort of things out of proportion. What's wrong with this? No one actually does care about this. No one in real life cares. Yes, they do. Stop saying people don't care. They do. I find it really infantilizing.
Yeah.
To say that,
prescribing a feeling on the entire population.
And where is this line coming from that, it's not, well, what is Sabrina Carpenter and Rachel Reeves? What kind of deal are they going to do with each other? That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
There are two things that we're talking about. The first thing that we're talking about is, while you're making these huge dramatic cuts, is it nice to go and take freebies to go to concerts that normal families cannot go to? No, it's not.
And your justification for that being, I can't buy my own
Then
ticket.
Don't go. A lot of people can't go. There were I'm sure there were thousands and thousands of children who wanted to go to that Sabrina Carpenter concert, and their parents had to tell them no because they didn't have the money for it. Really upsets me. I hate shit like that so much. Number two, who took her? That's always the big question. This was the furore with Keir Starmer about why he went to a certain number of events, free ticketed, when the Premier League took him, when Labour are about to regulate.
The football regulator was going to come in.
It's just, that's the egregious part of it. And so when a commentator stands up and they say, no one cares, it doesn't matter, this is all a fuss about nothing, that is extraordinarily disingenuous.
Because there is, I think it was out yesterday that I'm not going to say the acronym because I can't remember it, but long and short, it was the promotion company that was putting on the gig.
AEG.
That gave AEG. Am I wrong to think that there is a bill coming forward for the dynamic pricing.
You're bang on, old bean. You're bang on.
But of course, the two things are definitely not related.
And do you know what? They might not be related. The thing is, they might not be related at all.
Yeah.
But if you're going to sit in a box that's provided to you by a certain company, a company that might fall into certain regulation in the upcoming months, the public deserve to know about it. And frankly, you shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I don't want to, I want to make a comparison, but let me think, does it count as defamation?
If you have to think if it counts as defamation, dear listener, it probably does.
I don't know what conversations were had there, so I'm not talking about individually what tickets Keir Starmer took and what events Rachel Reeves went to, because I have no idea what conversations went down. But there is an aspect of this that's a little bit like insider trading, right? Which is, I appreciate that people meet with each other and there are lobbyists. When it's not done in a formal lobbying setting, I think it can feel a little bit like insider trading.
Yeah.
Do you think I skirted around it there?
I think you've given yourself enough headroom.
Headroom?
Yeah, I think so.
Speaking of which, one final point. All of this is a political choice. It's a political choice to decide that the money that you need to make up to bolster your headroom or to give you some breathing space had to come out of PIP payments, had to come out of cutting certain universal credit payments or freezing thresholds. That is a choice. And it's also a choice for the Prime Minister to appear in The Sun yesterday to make the argument for motorists, to say that he's going to put in this £1 billion package into fixing potholes, because that is a very popular policy. People hate potholes. And it's also a very visual image of a country being in decay, right? If there's a lot of potholes. So it's a political choice to decide to fix those. Also to freeze fuel duty. Now, I know that a lot of businesses need fuel duty frozen because it's almost a tax. Well, sorry, it is a tax, but it would be an extra tax levied on them and they can't cope with it with the NI increases. But it's a choice not to put that cost onto businesses and instead take it away from people who otherwise can't provide for themselves. Rachel Reeves could have changed the fiscal rules.
It's entirely within her
within her gift. And she didn't.
She decided, we're going to stick to the status quo. We're going to stick to what was given to us.
Do you want to talk to me about PMQs, or do you have anything else to say about the budget?
No, I think, it's all a bit depressing, isn't it? I guess we'll touch on, how long have we been going for, sir? 50.
Bloody hell, we'll just do a quick bit of PMQs
quick
then.
bit. I mean,
no one talked about it apart from Munira Wilson.
Yeah, well, Stephen Flynn touched on it as well.
Oh, of course he did, I'm sorry.
And we may be missing one or two others. Personally, I didn't really feel in the half hour the PMQs was on, apart from Stephen Flynn, that there was anything really to react to. Considering, actually, in some ways, there were things to react to. Namely being that on the day where Rachel Reeves was going to tighten the screw even further on the most vulnerable people in the country, the leader of the opposition decided to spend 7 of her questions talking about phones in schools.
Well, what was she going to say? I guess she could have made the argument that they should have cut claimants further, which is what Mel Stride attempted to do.
Well, it was either last week or the week before she was talking about employers' NI contributions.
This would have been a better week for it, actually.
Yeah, you're
right.
Like, just do something a little bit more related to the economy. But also, you're in opposition now. You can criticize them for their economic choices. If they come back to you and say, you were in charge for 14 years and you fucked it, your response, who was it the other
Helen
week?
Whately.
Helen Whately the other week was the first person I've heard with the response of, I don't want to hear you say that we've done this because we're not in government anymore. You're in government. What are you doing to fix the problems that you have in front of you? Kemi Badenoch needs to start coming with that. But instead, as I said, on today of all days, she comes with
ban the phones.
Ban the phones.
Which is stupid anyway, banning phones for under 16s. Oh, we can't. We don't want to regulate.
In schools.
We don't want to regulate the tech industry, so we're just going to ban the phones.
Yeah. I mean...
Do you not think the tech companies would have something to say about you banning phones for under 16-year-olds? Why don't you just tax them?
The questions were about schools, though.
Okay, schools.
When it comes to schools, I think
tech companies would have a few things to say about banning phones in schools.
Sure, but also schools already have rules in place to ban phones. The problem is that they're not enforced very well.
It's very difficult to enforce them.
Yeah. I mean, but like when I was in school, we all had our phones at all times, but I wasn't walking around the corridor with it. Yeah.
Because we didn't have smartphones.
Yeah. Speak for yourself. I did.
Did you?
What were you carrying in a cord? A whole lot.
I had a Motorola Razr.
I think I got a Sony Ericsson when I was in first year.
I wanted one of them so bad.
Yeah. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't first year. It was third year. I got a Sony Ericsson.
I remember one of the girls had the Dolce & Gabbana Motorola Razr.
Sick.
Wait. She had it though, and she told and it was like a really, really big thing. Everyone in the year was going absolutely mental for it. Like, oh my God, I can't believe you've got that. Turns out it was a fake. She'd just gone down the phone shop and got them to replace the panels, the hot pink panels. She got them to replace it with the gold panels. Yeah.
Oh, I bet she didn't live that one down.
She did not.
But yeah, no, with PMQs, you had Kemi Badenoch with the phones. You had Ed Davey with one question on adolescence, and another question was on the Atlantic piece about Jeffrey Goldberg inadvertently being added into the group that was discussing the airstrike against the Houthis.
Didn't see you in that group chat, Starmer, did I?
But like the questions themselves are kind of like particularly when it comes to the Lib Dems as well, I find the questions are all so America related rather than, look, Ed Davey has his points about care, quite often very poignant and powerful points. But again, on a day like this, where there are so many easy political wins and so many wins that can endear you to a new audience, and you decide to talk about something that the Prime Minister was asked about last week, and a news story that happened in America 2 days ago.
You could also ask them about it in the tea room afterwards, couldn't you? Did you watch the end of Adolescence?
Yeah.
Well, technically, Kemi's question was about adolescence as well, wasn't it, really?
Yeah. In a way. But I think just it's kind of, you're missing an open goal. And then when it came to kind of the Labour backbenchers with their...
care. Why didn't he ask about care?
Yeah. Well, this is what I'm saying.
Payment cuts.
He's won on that so many times.
Question. Pete Hegseth. Do you think that he added that editor from the Atlantic because he thinks that the Red Sea is the Atlantic? And it was just like word association.
He was adding the C into the group chat.
Yeah, he was just... Better let them know.
So we're going to be around next week.
What's the weather like?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's been like... was it the second year anniversary or the year anniversary that the Evergreen got stuck in the Suez Canal?
There's no way that was only a year ago.
Maybe it was like 3. I don't know. That diva, when did she get stuck there?
I'm going to say 2022.
Suez Canal, Evergreen, stuck. You won't even fucking believe it. Say it again.
22.
21 it was.
21.
Cause under investigation. What takes you 4 years to investigate that?
Surely it was just too big to go in the Suez Canal, wasn't it? I thought that was the long and short of it.
I think it was just too big. Yeah. I think I'd be sick at like cost cutting, like on like project management. I'd love to just stand in the room with whoever's doing the inquiry and them being like...
Just looking over their shoulder.
What's that?
Come on.
Oh, you've written there, too big for canal.
Yeah. Right, we're going to print, boys. We're going to print.
It is actually really funny how that happened. I love it when people call that cargo ship this diva.
This diva.
I love it. So, but this diva got stuck in this. She was stuck there for 6 days.
It felt like a lot longer than that, didn't it?
I hear
And the
something-
little tractors that were pulling her out.
Do you want to hear
Bless
something
her.
really stupid?
Go on.
It's so stupid.
I'm waiting.
Did a phone in,
Uh-huh.
and my phone in idea, the question we asked people to call in on, how would you move it?
Best answer?
I can't remember. God, I had another. What was my other favourite phone in that I did was. Do you remember when the Colleen Rooney thing broke?
Wagatha.
Wagatha.
Yeah.
It broke during our show, like immediately, and I was like, "Right, we're doing a phone in right now. Call in. What's the most conniving thing you've ever done?"
Sick.
It was sick.
That's a good idea. Is that a weekend or is it a Thursday? Friday?
Away, wouldn't I? It was not a weekend.
It wasn't a weekend.
That was weekday listening. That was prime time. I only
Sack
ever got
off
told
Prime
off,
Minister's questions.
I only got told off once for a phone in that we did. And that was because I hadn't listened in the morning meeting when we were told explicitly not to do a topic. And I wasn't listening. And
Straight out with it.
yeah. Should I tell you what it is?
Go on.
Scottish referendum. I thought why would I think that would be a cause
Trying
for
to
contention?
suppress democracy.
Yeah, why were they doing that?
That's interesting.
They had a real
isn't it?
problem with the Scottish referendum, actually, for some reason.
So did the Scots. Some of them still do have a problem with it.
I'd love to ask one, but we don't have one here.
This is an open invite to a Scot. We have two, but they're... Well, Laura's out on the green at the moment, isn't she?
She's down on the green. She's
Yeah.
interviewed Corbyn this morning, McDonald. She's
Busy
doing
girl.
Stephen Flynn. Oh, she should... Right as we're recording, she should be talking to Stephen right now.
Superb. Yeah, she's really... We're getting our money's worth out of her today.
All right, if you're still listening,
Bye.
tell us on the subreddit your favourite cargo ship.
And tell us how you'd move how you would have moved the Evergreen. Bye.
Do you reckon